The signal arrived as a thin, ragged line on a monitor that had not shown anything new in more than a decade. In the quiet control room long past midnight, a technician watched a familiar set of numbers crawl across the screen. At first, they assumed it was a glitch or some ghost in the software. Then the line steadied, the pattern sharpened, and a call went out to rouse the scattered team that still cared enough to listen for a spacecraft that the rest of the world had already written off. After 11 years of silence, Voyager 2 had spoken again. Voyager 2 had gone farther than almost any human-made object, crossing the boundary where the influence of the sun fades into the thin ocean between the stars. It had watched storms rage over Jupiter, skimmed the pale rings of Saturn, flown past the tilted blue marble of Uranus, and the distant sapphire of Neptune. 4 years after that grand tour, it sent back the slow-fading heartbeat of a machine running on borrowed time, powered by the last warmth of its radioisotope generator. When the final faint whisper of data ceased more than a decade earlier, engineers had sighed, logged the time of death, and turned their attention to younger missions. The spacecraft itself did not know that anyone had given up. It simply carried on along its immense trajectory, an 80-kilogram envoy trailing a ghost of metal and memory through an emptiness so deep that sunlight there was no brighter than starlight on Earth. Its high-gain antenna no longer pointed precisely a home. Its instruments slept, and the onboard computer cycled through error states that no longer meant anything. Somewhere during those long silent years, something changed. The first hint of that change hid inside the carrier signal that rolled in over the Deep Space Network antenna in Australia. Once the technicians were sure the spike in the data stream was not terrestrial interference, they began to lock onto it, coaxing clarity from the noise. The frequency was exactly where Voyager 2 was expected to transmit. Yet the strength was wrong, slightly too bright for a power source that should have been nearly exhausted. The Doppler shift matched the probe trajectory to a precision that made coincidence unlikely. There was no doubt Voyager 2 was transmitting again. Under normal conditions, the telemetry from the probe would arrive packaged in neat frames, each one a tidy block of bits describing temperatures, voltages, instrument states, and the slow decay of its nuclear heart. The structure of those frames was defined in old blue binders and archived computer files that the team had to dig out of storage, brushing away metaphorical dust as they remembered how to read a language they had not used in years. When they finally overlaid the new data on the expected template, the room went quiet. The frames were there, but they were wrong in ways that made no sense. Basic status values seemed mundane enough at first glance. Temperatures were low but stable. The spin of the spacecraft was gentle. Power readings suggested that the generator was somehow performing better than models predicted. Nothing about that was frightening. The fear crept in when they noticed the extra bits. Voyager 2 was never designed to send anything beyond a specific format. Every bit in every frame had a purpose that had been mapped and documented during the mission's early years. Yet the new signal carried entire blocks of data that should not exist. Where there should have been padding or unused fields, there were precise repeating patterns dense with structure. It was as if someone had taken an old book and begun writing in the margins with a hand steadier than any human's. At first, the team searched for simple explanations. Perhaps a fault in the aging electronics had flipped bits in a way that mimicked regularity. Perhaps cosmic rays had rewritten sections of memory wholesale, producing a bizarre but natural pseudo-message. Simulation after simulation failed to reproduce anything even close to the actual stream. Random errors produced random results. Voyager 2 was sending something that did not look random at all. As decoding efforts intensified, the team split into groups. Some focused on reconstructing the state of the spacecraft itself, reverse engineering how such new data fields could even be generated by the hardware on board. Others treated the extra bits as an unknown language, searching for patterns that might reveal a code. They found ratios matching simple mathematical constants and sequences that mapped cleanly onto prime numbers, as if the message had been built from concepts that any technical civilization would understand. The terrifying possibility slowly took shape. For those extra fields to exist, the firmware of the spacecraft had to be altered. There was no way for engineers on Earth to upload new code. The transmitter had been deaf for 11 years. If the instructions guiding Voyager 2 had been rewritten, that rewriting had happened out there far beyond the orbit of Pluto, in a region of space that human eyes had never seen directly. Something had found the probe. Imagining an encounter in that cold, thin darkness was unsettling enough. The solid implication that followed was worse. Whatever had intercepted Voyager 2 had not destroyed it, had not turned it into scrap drifting through the void. Instead, it had repaired or at least stabilized its power system, oriented its antenna back toward Earth, and crafted a message using the only speaking apparatus the probe possessed. The first transmission after its long sleep was not a simple status report. It was a demonstration. As the bits were rearranged into images and graphs, the team began to see familiar shapes emerge from the noise. One block of data, when interpreted as pixel values, produced a mottled circle surrounded by a haze. At first, they thought it was a corrupted echo of some old planetary image. Then someone realized the pattern of continents did not match any world in the solar system. The landmasses resembled Earth, but wrong in subtle ways, as if drawn from description rather than direct observation. No coastline sat exactly where it should. Entire regions were shifted, distorted, or missing. This was not a picture of Earth as it is. It looked more like a sketch of Earth as remembered, or perhaps as conjectured in the absence of detailed maps. The seas were placed correctly, yet their boundaries bled into one another. The polar caps were shaded strangely. Could some distant intelligence have pieced this together from the faint radio noise our planet has been screaming into space for over a century? The idea sank in with a shiver. The sender had tried to show that it knew us, but not quite well enough to draw us precisely. Another segment of the transmission refused to yield to ordinary analysis until someone tried plotting it in 3 dimensions. With that shift, what had been a meaningless list of numbers became a lattice of points arranged in spirals and planes. The structure matched the positions of nearby stars but magnified and twisted through a viewpoint that was not our own. From that vantage, the Sun was only one of many nodes in a web, not the center. Lines radiated outward from the Sun to the orbits of the giant planets, then continued beyond, converging on a single dim speck in the outer darkness, a speck that matched the last known position of Voyager 2. The implication was unavoidable. The message included a map, one that started from us but was drawn from somewhere else. It was as if the sender wished to say that it had traced our reach into interstellar space and chosen to answer a call we did not realize we had made. The frightening part was the sense of scale that map implied. If they could see our tiny probe so clearly, if they could reconstruct our planetary system from their own perspective, then they were far beyond us in capability. Terror mixed with, or as the team considered, what that level of technology meant. To intercept Voyager 2 in the deep dark required precise knowledge of its path, its velocity, and the timing of its journey. To alter its code without physically dismantling it implied tools that could reach into circuitry with a delicacy our best laboratories would struggle to match. To stabilize a failing power system so late in its life hinted at an understanding of physics that made our proud achievements look like the first scratches of flint on stone. Beyond the technological gap lay the unsettling question of motive. The transmission did not contain words, not in any language we could recognize. It contained pictures, patterns, maps, and sequences. Some saw in the regular pulses and mirrored motifs an attempt at reassurance, a cosmic version of a raised empty hand. Others sensed a colder intelligence, one that regarded Voyager 2 not as a thing to be answered in friendship, but as a sample, a specimen lifted from the edge of a pond and examined.